Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday morning services. I hope you've all had a great week and we're glad to see you all back again. So this morning, we're going to start off with a video and then we're going to have a reading.
Women have equal rights with men upon earth. In religion and society, they are a very important element. As long as women are prevented from attaining their highest possibilities, so long will men be unable to achieve the greatness which might be theirs. Abdul Baha.
Thank you so much. So now I'll introduce our speaker for today. And just as a reminder, please save all your questions until after the talk, and we'll have a Q&A session then. So our speaker today is Bayan Parhami, and his topic is Just Imagine a World Without Boundaries. Bayan is a 16-year-old Baha'i youth from Loudoun County. He's a rising senior at Riverside High School, and he also attends the Academy of Engineering and Technology. He plans to major in biomedical engineering in college. He has given many talks on the Baha'i principle of the equality of men and women, and is also interested in biblical and Quranic prophecies. So with that, I'd like to introduce Bayan.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a good week. So I had originally prepared this talk to give for the Optimist Oratorical Contest, which is a speaking contest for youth from around the world. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to deliver it for them because of the pandemic and everything that's been happening recently. So I decided to change the talk a little bit and deliver it for you all today because I feel very passionately about this issue. The topic originally provided by the speaking contest was Just Imagine a World Without Boundaries. There are many types of boundaries in our world, some of which include racial inequity, socioeconomic disparity, age-based discrimination, and gender equality. Today, I would like to focus on that last issue, gender inequality, because I feel that if it was resolved, many of the other issues I mentioned would also be resolved. I'd like to share with you all a picture of my dear grandmother. This was one of the last times I visited her in December before, unfortunately, she passed away in April from the coronavirus. I want to share with you all a story about one of the last things she told me that deeply moved me. I walked into the cold, sterile hospital room to visit my grandmother, who now had dementia and other health problems, clinging to the end of her life. Upon seeing me, her smile warmed the room. While she floated in and out of coherence, she reached moments of clarity in which she gave me and other family members morsels of wisdom and advice. My grandmother emigrated to the US from Iran around 40 years ago, packing up her life and 4 children to give them better opportunities. Throughout her life, she saw her mother die from tuberculosis, her father and brothers trying their best to raise her, an arranged marriage at a young age, a complete political and social revolution, a new homeland, 9 grandchildren, fear, happiness, and love. On this particular day I was visiting her, she shared with me what she felt was the greatest issue she had experienced in her life. Women, she told me emphatically, don't get respect. In all the years I've lived, and in all the cultures I've experienced, women are not treated the same as men. This is my dying wish, that women reach their full potential as equals. As you can see, this is a picture of me at my grandmother's burial site in April, planting flowers. We all had to wear masks and gloves because of the social distancing requirements, and only less than 10 people could attend the burial. Here's a picture of me and my family, my uncle and my cousins at her burial. And this is a picture of my cousins in front of her gravestone, which has her favorite Baha'i quote, which is, "The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens." Imagining a world without boundaries is both the most challenging task we are confronted with, but at the same time, it's my life's work as a Baha'i. Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, commanded us to, quote, "Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements." In today's age, there are many needs that desperately need resolving. Many of these, such as gender inequality, racial inequity, age-based discrimination, gross nationalism, and socioeconomic disparity, they intersect with and confound one another. However, having 3 sisters and hearing the words of my grandmother ringing in my ears, the issue of gender inequality is at the forefront of my mind. Gender inequality is one of the most pressing and persistent boundaries in our society, because from gender inequality stems countless other global deficiencies. However, some have argued that gender inequality, which is the economic, political, social, and educational disparity between men and women, has ebbed into a lesser issue over the past century. However, those who hold this belief are usually the ones who don't have to experience the reality of living as a woman. So although it may seem that women have made sufficient strides towards equality, continuing to treat these symptoms without remedying the root disease will never lead to a full recovery. I believe it is incumbent on both men and women to champion the cause of gender equality because it benefits them both. Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, believed that once women reach the heights of equal education and opportunities, war itself would cease to occur. He stated that, quote, "Women by nature is opposed to war. She is an advocate of peace. Children are reared and brought up by the mothers who give them the first principles of education and labor assiduously in their behalf. Consider, for instance, a mother who has tenderly reared a son for 20 years to the age of maturity. Surely she will not consent to having that son torn asunder and killed in the field of battle. Therefore, as woman advances toward the degree of man, in power and privilege, with the right of vote and control in human government, most assuredly war will cease, for woman is naturally the most devoted and staunch advocate of international peace. Some might think that this concept is too idealistic, but there's actually evidence for Abdu'l-Baha's claims. A study done by the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions found that in the US Congress, women introduced significantly more bills in the areas of civil rights and liberties, education, health, law, crime and family, and housing and community development, which are all areas that facilitate peace and justice. However, and unfortunately, bills that are proposed by women are passed by Congress significantly less than bills that are proposed by men. So there's still a long road towards realizing this principle of peace through women in government. Increasing education for women seemed to be the chief concern for Abdu'l-Baha. He repeatedly emphasized in his talks that the only difference between men and women is that women have been long denied the opportunity of an education. He said, quote, "The world of humanity has two wings. One is women and the other men. Not until both wings are equally developed can the bird fly. Should one wing remain weak, flight is impossible. What then constitutes the inequality between man and woman?" He continues. "Both are human. In powers and function, each is the complement of the other. At most it is this, that woman has been long denied the opportunity of an education." According to Baha'i laws, if education cannot be afforded to all the children, the girls must be given preference because as mothers, the benefits of an education can be spread widely throughout society. This Baha'i principle also finds grounding in research, interestingly. A study done by the Center for Global Development found that providing an extra year of education to girls increases their wages by 10 to 20%, which is 5% higher than the increase observed when educating boys by an extra year. These increased wages then create increased economic productivity in a country. Abdu'l-Baha also talked about the transformation of the very qualities of society and how they would begin to shift. He explained that, quote, "The world in the past has been ruled by force, and man has dominated over woman by reason of his more forceful and aggressive qualities, both of body and mind. But the balance is already shifting. Force is losing its dominance, and mental alertness, intuition, and the spiritual qualities of love and service, in which woman is strong, are gaining ascendancy. Hence, the new age will be less masculine and more permeated by the feminine ideals, or to speak more exactly, will be an age in which the masculine and feminine elements of civilization will be more evenly balanced." Indeed, as Abdu'l-Baha said, we can already see the balance shifting, especially in the current world pandemic. Women leaders have stepped up and shown themselves to be capable, competent, and outstanding leaders, using their stronger, quote, "feminine qualities" to lead their nations. For example, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, has been praised recently for quickly responding to the coronavirus with the widest ranging and toughest lockdown and border restrictions out of any country in the world. Using her spiritual qualities, as Abdu'l-Baha would call them, of love and service, Ardern addressed both the human and economic consequences of the pandemic. During her response, Ardern made it clear that she was not implementing these policies for any ulterior motive or political gain. She utilized frequent interviews, press conferences, and social media to keep herself transparent and is regarded as having a masterclass in crisis communication. Currently, the coronavirus is all but eradicated in New Zealand. Also, Tsai Ing-wen, who's the president of Taiwan, also displayed her exceptional leadership skills during the pandemic. She acted quickly in January and created preventative measures, imposed travel restrictions, and established quarantine protocols for high-risk travelers. She also implemented a tracking system to investigate the contact history of every patient in late January. She had the insight to monitor the demand in the market for commodities such as masks. She had the government take over the production and distribution of medical-grade masks and created a system for rationing them. Even though the World Health Organization has barred Taiwan from membership, Taiwan has handled the pandemic better than most of the WHO's members. This shows how the qualities Abdu'l-Baha mentioned, such as mental alertness, intuition, love, and service, in which women are strong, lend better in the modern era than force and dominance. As the world becomes better balanced in terms of men and women in government, we can expect to see these promising trends continuing. These principles remind us that it is now our imperative to advocate for the full access to and enjoyment of opportunities and education by women. To truly imagine a world without the boundary of gender inequality, we have to expand our vision beyond where it has previously been limited. We have to encourage women to run for political office at the same rate as men and remove any political obstacles standing in their way. We have to advocate for the education of girls and women, starting at the level of the family and extending to the level of higher education and beyond. We have to reshape workplaces to create environments conducive to the flourishing of women and adopt policies that facilitate their advancement. Once we see equal representation in Congress, when we elect a female president, when we see CEOs and boards of companies with 50% female members, and when we see women respected, both in the streets and at home, then can the bird of humanity soar towards equality and true prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bayan, for that interesting talk. Now, if anyone has any questions, please use either the chat function or the raise hand function on Zoom, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. And we'll take them in the order they're received. Okay, I think we have a question from Armin, so I'm unmuting you.
Hi, Bayan. Great job. But I'm biased. I'm your mom. I have a question. So what do you think the youth, especially young men such as you, can do to help bring equality? Just your perspective.
Well, I do have a lot of experience as a boy and like being raised in a Baha'i family. So what I think is that I think boys, especially young boys, need to be taught from a young age, especially by their mothers, that men and women are equal, because just like adopting policy changes, like protests, all these things, they're helpful, but to a certain extent, they can't go all the way because, like I said, continuing to treat symptoms without remedying the disease. Disease is that in the minds of most people, men and women aren't equal. And so if you just continue treating the symptoms, the disease will just keep popping up over and over throughout history. So what I think that we need to do is make sure young boys understand from a young age, because that's where like behaviors and like perspectives are solidified, that men and women are equal and they don't have to follow in the footsteps of their forefathers, their ancestors, their culture, because one of the biggest Baha'i principles is independent investigation of truth. And no more is that like important than in our modern era where there's so many conflicting views and opinions. And as I showed you, like there's lots of evidence for women being beneficial to the world of humanity. So at this point, we need to like create a radical shift in the mindset of people, and that starts with women educating their children, because that's where it all starts.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mitch, so I will unmute you.
Thank you. First of all, Bayan, I'm not your mother, I'm not a relative, but it was a wonderful talk. Thank you very much. And I'm not biased as others are. So my question, I'm interested in the investigation you did into how countries led by women are doing so much better than most countries in terms of handling the pandemic. And I know you covered it a lot, but I also get the feeling you really looked into this. Are there any common attributes across the range of these 7 or more women leaders that indicate to us maybe what's causing this significant difference between these 7 or more countries and most other countries? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. So I think it's important when choosing a political leader to look at their qualities, not just, I mean, it's important to look at their track record of policies and how they vote and all that, but it's also important to look at their qualities on how they act and how they serve. And what you can see in New Zealand, what you can see in Thailand, also Singapore, Singapore is handling the pandemic very well and their president is a woman. What you can see in all these leaders is that they value service to others higher than what you see in countries that aren't doing so well in the pandemic. You can see that countries that aren't doing so well are worrying more about their own image or worrying about showing off power and dominance. And what you see in the countries that are handling better, whether man or woman, is that they're worrying more about their people and worrying more on how to address like human consequences, economic consequences, rather than like rivalries between nations. And so that's why you can see, I think it's perhaps even a sign that Thailand wasn't in the World Health Organization, still aren't, and they're handling it better. I think they've been kept out of all that because the World Health Organization is very political these days. It's worrying more about like loyalties and political ties, and Thailand's been kept out of that, and you can see they're doing very well. And so whether man or woman, you have to value the qualities of a leader. And you can see women tend to be have a little bit better capacity in the qualities of service, mental alertness, intuition, all these things.
Thank you. I think you meant to say Taiwan instead of Thailand. So just wanted to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Our next question is from Farah. So I will unmute you.
Thank you. Bayan, I want to thank you for such a great expression of your views about the role of a woman in the world. And the way you presented it was really right to the point. And you brought up a lot of fantastic, views of Baha'i faith towards women and their role. I, as an educator, wanted to just add to something you mentioned about the fact that education begins at home. And the first educator is a mother, for sure. But I really honestly believe that young ladies, way before they become a mother, have to consciously build their own self-confidence, self-respect, and truly, sincerely work on all those virtues that they are valuable, and they can make you more, better equipped to become a mother. Because before you have the fetus, you have to be able to consciously practice all these values that you want to pass on to your baby. And I really honestly think, in addition to that, other women can really make a difference in the life of women in other countries in so many other ways. But I just wanted to mention it briefly so I don't get into details, but thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree completely. There was this quote from Abdu'l-Baha that I read and I liked. It was that he hopes that women in the West and women in the East can both improve themselves to show others that they're valuable, because women are more valuable than most people think. He was talking about proving themselves in school on examinations. And so I agree with you that women should build their self-confidence, and then once they become mothers, they can become good mothers and teach their children, raise their boys and girls equally. Like I've seen a lot in popular media that like boys are treated differently in terms of dating in a family. Like the boys can go date, but the girls have to stay at home. And this is just even popular in the United States, which is seen as like somewhat progressive in terms of gender equality. But we have to equally raise our children so that in the future in society they can be equal members.
Great. We have a comment/question in the chat from Cameron. He says, amazing speaker. Do you think it is important for male leaders to choose female cabinet members, advisors, etc., in order for a female perspective to be heard at every table?
Yeah, I do think that male leaders should choose female cabinet members. I think it should be balanced. I know a lot of people think that if we're just like choosing women just because they're women, that the quality of service will go down, the quality of their like leadership will go down. But the thing is that the point that we're at right now is barely any women. I've heard many countries have like 10 to 20%, highest is like 40% of women in the legislative, executive branches of the governments. And so at this point, it's more important to increase the participation of women because they're half of our human society, and they have whole new perspectives to offer. Like I said, they bring perspectives on peace and war because they're the first educators. They have that special bond with their children that men have to a certain extent, but women are stronger in that bond. And so representing both perspectives at this point in history, I think is the most important thing.
Great. While we're waiting for other questions, I have a question. So one of my degrees is in political science, and something we studied a lot is, why is only 20% of Congress female, and, why don't we have as much female representation in government? And actually the biggest reason is not that women are not voted for as much, it's that they don't run as much. They just, run at much lower rates. And that's the reason that we have much less representation. So how do you think we can encourage women to, take, whether it be in the government or in corporations or other leadership roles, how can we encourage them to do that while also acknowledging that women have, a special role as mother and nurturer of the family if they choose to have one?
Well, I think there's many ways to do that. Recently there is, well, not recently, but stronger recently, there's movement for empowering women. And so that's through education of girls, education of like teenagers, like that. And so what's really important is to like make girls realize that they are more valued than others might want them to believe. And so there are many like tools to do that. I know in the Baha'i Faith, we have children's classes where we teach young children about all these Baha'i principles of equality of men and women. And then there's Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program where a facilitator helps a small group of youth from around ages 11 to 14. They learn these qualities, they go through the books, they do service projects, and showing women that they have the power to shape their society is important because then in the future, like you said, they can run for Congress at the same rate as men, not just believe as society might tell them or their family might tell them or their friends might tell them that they're less valued, they have less skills. And then in terms of if they choose to be mothers, we have to acknowledge that the mother is one of the most important roles in society. So there has to be some kind of like preference for that. So like longer maternity leave if they wish to raise children for longer. We need to be able to, because women are a valuable resource. They can be thought of as like human capital. And so when you have something so valuable, you have to give it preference, help it grow, help it be able to be utilized.
Great. Our next question is from Mahin, so I will unmute you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bayan. This was excellent. Would you please also touch on the subject of the duty of a father in upbringing daughters? What is their role? One day you will be a father. What do you think that, I mean, I know, and we all know that the father plays an important role too, but can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I think it's important that both parents be very involved, because the parents are the primary like shaper of the young mind. And so if a father shows their daughter that it's good for them to be empowered, to be strong, to be outspoken, then they will be in the future. I think the most influence we can put as possible on the children to grow, nourish, to be empowered is very important. And as you know, in our current society, unfortunately, men have more like quote unquote financial power because of like ingrained prejudice against women, all that stuff. So to a certain point, it's important for men to provide for the family, but at the same time, we have to empower women to also be the breadwinners, to also provide for their family, to, like I said, run for political office. And then the fathers should also like teach their children, because the most influence is the best.
Thank you. Also be an example.
Yeah, showing an example, yeah.
Sons to respect women and help them gain their place in the world. Thank you. Wonderful, thanks.
Thank you. So Erwin says, thank you for the great talk. Since you'll be going off to college soon, I wanted to share the good news that 56% of American college students are women. Please feel free to comment on the significance of this.
I think that's great that women go to college more. Well, not more, but they're going more than they used to, because it's important that women, they gain the education, they show off that they're valuable, because in our current society, it's the only way for, well, one of the ways for women to gain equality is to show that they're valuable. So gaining an education is important. But I've read recently that unfortunately the workplace, less women are entering certain fields than men, like the science fields. And so it's important that also, while women get the education, they're also accepted into the workforce. We need to eliminate like the gender wage gap. And because although as much as women get educated, they also have to be using those skills to contribute to society. Because if they don't, then the education is going to waste. Like higher education needs to be utilized.
Okay, we have a question from Sandra. I'm unmuting you.
Hi, this is something I've thought about for a long time, and kind of plays into what you were just saying and into what Pamela said, but it feels to me, or seems to me, that where women start to fall behind men is when they have children. And I've never been able to reconcile that conundrum about the amount of time it takes to be with an infant and nurse an infant and raise a young child. And in all that time, you're kind of losing your position socially and professionally. And I've never been able to think of a solution to that, because men never have to face that problem.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the most like pressing like boundaries to gender equality, is that women have to spend so much more time raising their children. And so what I think is that while women are the first educators of the children, men also should play an important role, take some of the responsibility of caring, raising, because women also deserve to advance their careers, get promotions, higher jobs, advance. And so I think in the future, if we can apply this principle of educating children from a young age, then the mindset of society will shift, and then we can have more leniency for like women that have to raise children, like more maternity leave, more leniency for taking time off to address things in their family. But at the current moment, I think the important things we can do is raise children better and share the responsibility of raising a family with the husband, because they play an equal part of being a role model, of sharing in the duties, all that.
Yeah, along with that question, I'm just going to ask the question. If anyone else has other questions, please raise your hand. But I also wanted to say that, you know, a big thing people are talking about these days is that, you know, when a woman voices her opinion, it's considered aggressive. When a man does, it's considered assertive or bold or confident. And so, you know, there's been a lot of focus on, like, you know, we shouldn't label women's, you know, like when women act the same as men, we shouldn't label them in a negative way. But I was thinking, you know, does this kind of indicate that maybe men shouldn't be exhibiting some of these qualities of aggression and, you know, interrupting people? And, you know, maybe the focus shouldn't just be on women changing their behavior or people labeling it differently, but, you know, maybe we should bring some of those more feminine qualities into the workplace or into government, you know, like qualities like, you know, that previous question about, you know, women handling the coronavirus. You know, I've seen a lot of these leaders exhibiting more humility, more compassion, more kindness. So maybe that's something that we should be trying to introduce across the board, regardless of gender, rather than just trying to, like, focus on women rather than, you know, everyone.
Yeah, I agree. Like Abdul Baha said, in our new age, the more valuable qualities are mental alertness, intuition, love, and service, and both genders can benefit from learning these qualities. And so I think that it shouldn't be thought of as a good thing when women interrupt others and stuff. I think it should be considered as a negative quality that men are interrupting others. I think we need to balance these, like, stereotypical feminine and masculine elements so that society in general becomes more, like, balanced and more calm and more permeated with, as Abdullah said, with the feminine ideals.
Okay, next we have a question from Patia. Go ahead.
I'm wondering, like, what do you think are the shortcomings of current, I guess, the feminist movement or just political movements in general that are centered around, like, you know, getting equal rights for women? I know, at least in my generation and amongst my peers, there's this whole kind of shift towards, like, I don't know if it's called like a free body movement, or, like, you know, I guess women asserting their independence and being able to, like, do what they want with their bodies, and I guess, yeah, in a more maybe superficial or more physical aspect. So what do you think, why is it more important to raise men, as you were saying, rather than relying on these social movements of our day and age?
Well, I think these social movements have a lot of shortcomings, as you said. Like, the feminist movement has become politicized, even though it shouldn't be, because the feminist movement is just trying to make men and women equal in rights and opportunities. But recently it's become considered to be a political stance to say you're a feminist. And I think that since women have been oppressed so long, the balance has been towards men so long that women are trying to jerk it the other way, like farther than balanced. And with, like you said, the free body movement and all those things. So I think instead of oppressing women so long and thinking that if you stop oppressing them, they're gonna go towards all the way the other end, that's just a sign that they're being oppressed. So we need to, like, remove obstacles, and then the pendulum will balance again, because when someone's being oppressed for so long, they lash out. And as a society, we've seen women lashing out, protesting, because these things aren't right. And so I think that while social movements are good, they can easily become politicized. So while we should engage in social action, we should remain nonpartisan, because when you become partisan, then you're leaving out half or more of society saying And those like men and women, for example, they say that the feminist movement is associated with the Democratic Party, then half of the society, Republican Party, can't engage in social action to end the oppression of women because they feel that it's a political statement against their ideals. Rather, we should engage in social action, but stay true to the ideals rather than the political statements, and just try to engage in conversation with others rather than arguments and debates.
Okay, another question from Farah. I'm unmuting you.
Yes, I just wondered, I lived in other parts of the world, mainly in Middle East, and I have been to Far East and I've seen how women function, but I really don't know much about most of Far East. I know about Middle East though. At the present time, what we are discussing is mainly really approaching the West and how women have a voice or not. But the truth is, in the Middle East, right now, women have very little or zero voice, nothing. So I was just wondering if you could share with us what's your view of the future and how can women have a little voice. And just remember, the fact is that those countries for ages and ages have been influenced by religion to actually give a role to women as just mothers. And of course, it's a very valuable role, but women have no voice. I mean, I lived in Saudi Arabia, and women, 20 years I was there, and I realized how women were given permission more and more to go to school, get educated. But as you mentioned earlier, they hardly get a chance to use that education in the society. Of course, that's just the way it is. But what's your view about it? How can we change that?
I think you're right. In the Middle East, women don't even have the chance to voice their opinions and voice their thoughts. And so, as you said, women in the Middle East are increasingly given access to an education, but then they're not given an opportunity to use it. So we see, like in Iran, for example, Nobel Peace Prize winner women had to leave Iran because they weren't given an opportunity. And then once they leave, then they do great things in other countries. So I think what we can do is use the influence of other countries to pressure these oppressive countries into liberating their women. As you know, one of the Baha'i principles is having a world tribunal for disputes between nations. And so it would function similar to the UN, but unfortunately the UN has veto power, is very politicized, has not much force to enforce its decisions. So I think in the future we need to advocate for some kind of world governance so that these disputes, when half of the world, like you said, the West is liberating women increasingly and the East isn't, we have to put pressure, whether that's political pressure, military pressure, because it's like one of the most dire needs in our society. So I think in the future what we can look to is improving things like the United Nations, improving them so that we can put pressure on nations to liberate their women.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Shaheen. I'm unmuting you.
Hi, everyone. This is Shaheen Mahajer. Bayan, first, I want to commend you on your kind of study of the equality of women and men at such a young age. It reminds me of myself when I was a Baha'i youth long few years back. But anyways, so I wanted to also bring up, in my, kind of going through adulthood, being married, watching my wife go through her education, going through her career, sort of having to give that up when we had children and, kind of raising our children at the moment. it made me think as well about, kind of the value that we put on jobs and on kind of success. How do we define success? A lot of times we define success in the West as, kind of being a powerful job or a CEO or a doctor or something along those lines. And I think this is much more success to me is being able to raise children that, truly believe and worship in the virtues of God and the writings. And to me, that is more successful than any career or any CEO that may, kind of accomplish anything. And it has really made me question our society values that we put and how we define success. And equality really, to me, it shouldn't be defined by that. If we look at in my college days, as I studied gender development in Africa and Southern Africa, particularly Malawi, most of those tribes were run by women. These women also had children. They also had to raise their families, and they also had to earn a living. And in some regards, I think the value was placed differently than we do in our world, in our Western world and thought. So I just kind of wanted to ask you and kind of, have you thought about some of those aspects, and as well as everyone who's listening, that it's not necessarily, judging our society based on, kind of how much successful you are and, the amount of wealth you accumulate or the job titles you achieve, but more in the equality, that it's really a different sense of equality that we have yet to realize in our Western world or even Eastern world, that will kind of truly bring about that equality that I believe is really in, the eyes of God that Baha'u'llah speaks about.
Yeah, I think there's two really important things here, which is one, that the value of being a mother is kind of being underrepresented in our society. And at the same time, if women choose to go into careers, they should be allowed to do so. So we should try to teach the importance of raising boys and girls the same as mothers. But we should also, if women choose to go into careers, go into anything they desire, we should remove obstacles, because to truly have a just society, we have to put into practice. We can't just say women are good as mothers and therefore they should stay as mothers, or because they have equal rights, they're created equal. So while they do have an important role as a mother, they should be allowed to we should remove any obstacles if they choose to have a higher career, have like success. And yeah, I agree, success is becoming sort of distorted in our Western society, becoming more about money and power, when in Baha'i teaching, success would be defined as serving humanity, embodying the qualities of God, such as love, service, kindness. So I think there's two processes. We have to re-educate the children, change the mindset of society, but also remove all obstacles in the path of women advancing.
Thank you. Our next question is from Beta.
So I was just wondering, do you think that it's just the parents who should be teaching their children at a young age, and they're the ones who shape their kids into becoming equal in the future and having that mentality? Or do you think it's also the job of the schools that kids grow up in, and the teachers and what they implement and stuff? I was just wondering what you think.
I think it's a little bit of both, because as we're taught in the Baha'i Faith, we each have a twofold moral purpose, which is to better ourselves and to better society, because we are a product of our environment. And so we can't just better ourselves, read more, study more, become more just. But then if we live in a society that is unjust and not conducive to becoming more just, then it's difficult to advance. And so we each have a responsibility to change ourselves and to change society, because we all have some degree of ingrained bias in our minds because we are grown up in society. So I think in terms of society, we can, women and men who work in schools should arrange events to teach the children. when in the workplaces there should be events to re-educate, there should be all these things, because we're products of our environment, and we're able to shape ourselves.
Our next question is from Ryan. I'm unmuting you.
Hi, everyone. My question is just very simple. It's like, how do you see yourself implementing these things in your own life, like from a local personal standpoint instead of at a large scale UN world government standpoint? Because I know like that probably won't happen in our lifetimes, but I guess we can all start from a local level. And I guess any kind of action would you take outside of education of children that you'd recommend that individuals take to kind of promote this ideology? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. One person alone can't change the United Nations, and so what we all have a responsibility to ourselves and to others to embody these principles in our own lives. And how we do that is through treating women equal, which I know sounds ironic, but a lot of people might unconsciously have micro prejudices, microaggressions towards women and not even realize it. So in our own lives, we have to have conversations with others. If you're not a mother, you can still have conversations with your friends, with your coworkers, with your family, because education is really the foundation for changing society, because no matter how much you change the policies, you can't change the minds of people that way. So education is the way, and how we do that at a grassroots level individually, because these big world events don't happen on a small scale. What we do individually is have conversations, engage in social action, teach. This is how we embody the virtues in our own lives to affect the greater world.
How do you think your perspective has been shaped, living with, 3 sisters and a mother? How do you think your perspective on gender equality, has been affected, or if it hasn't? Can you speak to that?
Well, yeah, I think that it's become like imprinted in me, because for others, they don't have the opportunity of being raised with 3 sisters and a mother, because for others, they're raised in homes that sometimes don't emphasize these qualities. They outwardly say they believe it, but it has to be actively taught and put into practice. So personally, being grown up with 3 sisters, I notice a lot of things that my friends sometimes don't, like aggressions against women, whether subtle or in a joking manner. I notice these things, and I think it's important that I speak out against them, because no matter how much we say we believe it, talking and pretty words is never enough. You have to put it into action. So being raised with all these women, I would say, has taught me to observe the world around me more and see these see injustices that are on a small scale.
I have a question from Farah. I'm unmuting you.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. Thank you so much for everybody's questions and certain answers. I really wanted to mention one more thing, because somebody just recently said something, I think it was Shaheen, about education. And I honestly, and the role of a woman as a mother, I really think it's true that the role of a mother truly is very, very important. But at the same time, I think the mother who is more educated and more exposed can really help their individual children better with their needs. So as an educator, I have seen how some mothers come to school and share their concerns and their views, or lack of knowing how to handle things at home with kids. So I really think it's really the most important role of a woman to raise a child. But at the same time, I think we should remember that the mother who is more exposed more educated, more liberated, is able to serve her own children, raise her own children better than a mother who has been in the dark, not exposed, because that mother is also a loving mother, no doubt. It's just that they don't have the tools needed to take care of their children's needs. For example, if a child has need for special education, handling them emotionally differently at home, they need to be educated and exposed in order to help their children at home as they're raising them. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think the most burdening job is being a mother, because you're shaping an individual or more that are going to be in society, and they're a product of your education. So I think the value of a mother is underrepresented, and so we need to provide more resources to help mothers become better mothers, have support. And so I agree that yeah, being a mother is very important. And so it's one of the most, because trying to be a mother and having a career at the same time is so hard. So we need to have more support and more resources available for women to do that, to educate sufficiently their children and also have their own personal pursuits.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, with that, I just wanted to say, I agree with everything you've said. And especially, I think, what you said about how men and women need to take equal responsibility. I see that a lot, like a lot of, girls and women like around my age, especially, entering professional fields. It's just a topic of, thought, how am I going to have a family? How am I going to become really successful in my career? And I don't feel that men have that concern at the top of their mind. If they want to get married and have children, it's just considered something that will be normal and it'll happen and they'll still be able to advance in their career. Whereas all that burden of worrying about it seems to fall on women. So I think, one way to start is to just feel that men are like equal partners in this, trying to solve this problem. And whether that be in the workplace, implementing more paternity leave, or even other countries don't have, as much of a focus of, working yourself to death. I mean, a lot of European countries have less hours and more, balance between personal and professional life. And so I think changing the culture, as well as, emphasizing the importance of women will help, because at a certain point, it really is impossible without maybe the help of extended family, but it really is impossible to live up to this, 80-hour work week and be a mother, and do a good job, because a mother is, like, I think Shaheen had mentioned this, being a mother is also undervalued. It is a full-time job, if not 5 jobs, chef, personal assistant, homework helper, chauffeur, as well as spiritual educator, which, in the Baha'i faith, we know that women are the primary spiritual educators. So I feel that, we need to emphasize the value of motherhood, and, saying someone is a stay-home mom shouldn't have a stigma attached to it, because that is like 5 jobs in one. So if there are no other questions or comments, thank you so much for that talk. That was really great, and the discussion afterwards. So we're going to end with a video, which is a Baha'i prayer set to music, and then we'll close with another prayer.
hand. Oh God, thou art my God, my refuge, my refuge, my refuge. Oh God, thou art my God, my refuge, my refuge, my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be happy and joyful peace. I will no longer be full of anxiety. Nor will I let trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. Oh God, thou art no friend to me when I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, oh Lord. I dedicate myself to thee, oh Lord. Start over. Oh God, refresh and glad my spirit, my spirit, my spirit. Oh God, refresh and glad my spirit, my spirit, my spirit. Purify my heart, illumine my power. I lay all my affairs in thy hands. Oh God, thou art my guide and my refuge, my refuge, my refuge. Oh God, thou art my guide and my refuge, my refuge, my refuge. I will no longer be both sorrowful and grieved. Be happy and joyful be. I will no longer be full of anxiety. Nor will I let trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. One more time. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. Oh God, thou art no friend to me when I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, oh Lord. I dedicate myself to thee, oh Lord.
O thou kind Lord, this gathering is turning to thee. These hearts are radiant with thy love. These minds and spirits are exhilarated by the message of thy glad tidings. O God, let this American democracy become glorious in spiritual degrees, even as it has aspired to material degrees, and render this government victorious. Confirm this revered nation to upraise the standard of the oneness of humanity, to promulgate the most great peace, to become thereby most glorious and praiseworthy among all the nations of the world. O God, this American nation is worthy of thy favors and is deserving of thy mercy. Make it precious and near to thee through thy bounty and bestowal. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.